Welcome, everyone. It is incredible to have so many of you joining us. Thank you for being here today. My name is Nightingale Murray. I was born and raised in a village at the edge of the Rift Valley in rural Kenya, and I have lived in Liberia and the United States, which I also consider my home. Both my clinical work as a registered nurse and my public health advocacy have shown me that human health and environmental stewardship are fundamentally connected. My advocacy work focuses on this important intersection through a community-centered One Health lens. Our Liberian organization is called COCOI, and our global project is called One Health for All. Right to Health is a grassroots movement of volunteers dedicated to pragmatically fighting for health equity. We came together as a team in response to the COVID-19 pandemic based on a shared belief that health is a human right. In our last webinar, we explored the opportunities for and barriers to health worker organizing within and across professions and levels of training. So today we will dive into the interconnected nature of COVID-19 and the climate. Using a participatory community-centered lens, we will explore the shared root causes of the two and highlight concrete actions we can take now, both individually and together, to prevent pandemics and achieve climate justice. Individual health is inextricably linked to planetary health, and through today's conversation, we hope to cultivate models for effective collaboration that will allow us to build a movement that directly links environmental sustainability with human health. So we hope that today's discussion will empower you to connect with and engage in collaborative and cross-disciplinary organizing efforts that engage both the climate justice and health equity movements. Before we get started with our panel, we'd like to know a bit more about you all so we can have a better grasp on who our audience is. So to that end, we have two quick demographic questions for you to answer before we proceed. They should be popping up on your screen, and I'll give a moment to answer before continuing. Okay, thank you for answering those couple questions. Knowing information about each one of us helps us to better understand who we're reaching out to and where we could use additional outreach. We will begin today with a panel discussion with a diverse group of individuals engaged in the international climate justice movement. And today's panelists are Dr. Tinashe Goronga, a physician from Zimbabwe currently working on his MPH in Belgium. He is also a community organizer with a campaign against racism, and he has written about the importance of community participation and ownership in interventions. Tatiana Souza is a researcher from Brazil with a doctorate in public health, whose work focuses on social and environmental determinants of health, with a focus on indigenous and otherwise vulnerable communities. We also have Council Member Cheryl Davila, who is a member of the Berkeley City Council representing District 2. Council Member Davila created a climate emergency mobilization task force in her city to bring together elected officials, activists, and organizations in regional just transition to a regenerative economy. She is also responsible for adopting the third climate emergency declaration in the country. We have Maya Menezes. She is the Senior Manager of Programming and Development at the LEAP, a climate justice organization that believes in expanding coalitions to build and strengthen a bold and intersectional climate movement. We are incredibly grateful to have each of these individuals here with us today to share their experiences and expertise. So following our panel and an audience question and answer, we will invite each of you to join a small group discussion to debrief, highlight points of resonance, and discuss concrete actions we can each take in this very important moment. We hope that through these small groups, everyone gets the opportunity to envision and co-create sustainable solutions to optimize planetary health, prevent future pandemics, and achieve justice for all. We have also a team of trained small group facilitators who have stepped up to create space for these conversations. And we want to offer a huge, huge thank you to them for taking this on. After our small group discussions, we will once again reconvene as a larger group to debrief next steps regarding the actions we hope each of you will elect to take. I will also just really quickly go over some notes on technology. So all attendees will be muted during this panel discussion. You can submit any questions via the question and answer tool at any time, and we will refer to these questions during our question and answer time following the panel discussion. A huge shout out to Claire from our team who is typing out closed captioning during our panel. We are also recording the panel portion of this webinar to be shared within the coming weeks, so look out for that. After the panel and Q&A, we will share specific instructions, logistics for moving to small groups discussions. One last word of thanks. We have an amazing team of more than 30 people who have met multiple times each week. And in many, they have put in many hours to pull this together. So thank you to all of you who have done that. And if you're interested in being involved moving forward, we will be following up with information on how that is possible. So with that, I am pleased to begin today's discussion. COVID-19, climate, and community, making connections to achieve justice for all. Okay, so I will go ahead. Thank you, Hindu, for joining us. We had expected Hindu to join us, but due to some difficulties, she wasn't able. So Hindu, you are so welcome. So I will introduce you, Hindu. Hindu Umaru Ibrahim is an environmental activist and a member of Chad's pastoralist Mbororo community. Hindu began advocating for indigenous rights and environmental protection at the tender age of 16, when she also founded the Association of Indigenous Women and Peoples of Chad to introduce new income revenue activities for women and collaborative tools such as 3D participatory mapping to build sustainable ecosystems, management, and reduction of nature-based resource of conflicts. So we have our entire team here now. So before we begin our panel presentation, I feel that it is vital for us to build a common foundation through grounding ourselves with a brief overview description about what we mean by climate justice. So according to Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland, climate justice insists on a shift from a discourse on greenhouse gases and melting ice caps into a civil rights movement with the people and communities most vulnerable to climate impacts at its heart. The Global Justice Ecology Project is even more explicit about grounding climate justice in communities. The heart of climate justice is the understanding that the urgent action needed to prevent climate change must be based on community-led solutions and the well-being of local communities, indigenous peoples, and the global poor, as well as biodiversity and intact ecosystems. That powerfully encapsulates the reasons that we are here together today, to answer the question of how will we collaborate, learn from each other, and grow into beautifully diverse planetary community, and co-create equitable and just solutions for all. So our first question is meant to draw out true questions about the places that mean the most to us, the places that we love. So, dear panelists, I will go ahead and ask you the first question. And for purposes of order, I will ask you, Dr. Goronga, to please share about a place that is very special to you, where you feel most at home and most alive, so that you deeply care about protecting this space. And from you, anybody else can come in.
Thank you so much, Nightingale, and I'm really honored to learn from the various panelists and also the people attending. So it's got to be the first one. Yeah, but for me, one place that I feel at home is green spaces, particularly because what happens is, like, over the past, like right now I've been studying in Belgium, and as you move from one space to another, and I've been, for the past few years, I haven't really stayed up in one fixed place for a very long time. So as a result, what I usually do when I go to a new environment, most of the time I look for a green place, preferably if there's a river, even better. And when I'm there, when you're just surrounded by nature, and unfortunately, if you are in a lot of developed setting, there's usually the background noise of the environment, the traffic and everything. But sometimes the sounds of the birds and the sounds of the sounds of the river usually help in masking that background, and it helps in calming me down, and it helps in making me sometimes forget some of the chaos that would be happening around me. And it's a place that also helped me that grounds me and remind me of the various places that I'm attached to, be it some of the one of the rural communities that I used to work in, which is close to the Lake River, or sometimes the memories of the walks that I used to take with my family and all. So being in that serene environment makes me feel at home, because it connects me, the feelings that I have, and feeling safe and feeling at home connects me to my family. And that's why I always strive to, by all means if possible, to protect as many green places as possible and limit our encroachment into such spaces.
Thank you, Dr. Goronga. Maya, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think a place that it's hard to feel connected to, I think, so many different places, but I think that there are places that have become very significant to me over time, if I'm thinking about it with a climate lens. My parents are from Saligaon, which is a village in Goa on the west coast of India. And I was very young the first time that I went and got to see where my family grew up for so many generations. But I remember so many more vivid memories of what everything looked like and what it was like to walk on the beaches there when I was older. And I was looking at a map. I believe I was sitting in my apartment in Toronto in the dead of winter, minus 40 degrees. And I was looking at an old map of Goa, and I was tracing it in the Guardian and seeing what part of the my family homes would be underwater in the next 20 years. And it was all of it. And suddenly that place had a whole different meaning for me. I think when we're part of diasporas, especially, I'm right now in Kajiptuk, so-called Halifax in Canada. And it feels it's very hard to have that connection to home and connection to land and to be on stolen land and thinking about what that means. But I just keep thinking about all of these massive implications for a place that is so incredibly important to my family, full of mangroves and really delicate ecosystems, and places where my family had fished for generations upon generations. And so I think throughout the last decade of my life, I've been living in intensely coastal areas on both sides of Turtle Island. And so I think when I think about displacement a lot when I think about my connection to land, and about sovereignty. So that's my answer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Tatiana, would you like to share?
Hi. First, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here. I can say another place than Amazon, mainly considering the importance of this place for my identity as ecologist, as public health research, and as a person from South America. This in Amazon was my first internship. I spent a few months in Amazon when I was my first year in college, and this place changed how I was understanding life. I was introduced to different ways to think life, and this is very powerful. And this place, I think, not just forest, but people living there show us other ways to breathe, to be here, and to resist. I think today, more than other moments, people from forests show us in Brazil how to resist, how to breathe, regardless any political, climate, environmental threat. So I think to talk about Amazon is talking about energy, about resistance, and future, I hope. That's that.
Thank you, Tatiana. Oh, Hindu, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay. Please share with us. Did you get the question?
May you repeat it, please?
Yes. If you can please share about a place that is very special to you, where do you feel most at home and most alive? A place that you deeply care about protecting. You can describe to us how you feel when in that space.
Sure. Firstly, hi, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be in this panel, and it is really a right time to talk about climate and COVID. And I hope everyone, it's okay, and we will be out from this pandemic and from the climate change soon. So I think the place who can be very special for me, I can say it is the Earth. It is the Mother Earth in general. Why? Because I am coming from a nomadic communities. So being a nomadic, you do attach to the land, territories, and resources. So you do move from one place to another one to find water and pastures. So the most important for me, it's having water, having pasture, and having the fertile land. When the cattle of my community can move in peaceful And when my people can move and live in harmony with others who are a farmers or who are a fisherman, and then they said, in the place that I miss more is the place where I can smile, the real perfume of all the land. When you have the rain, and then after the rain, you have a special perfume of all the different grass, different resources that you can smile. The sound of the birds that I hear, that I used to hear when I was kids, and when during the rain season, that the sound of the insect, of the animals that I can hear. And then it's so peaceful when you hear those sounds and you smell this beautiful perfume of the natural resources, and then you feel connected to the land. So I miss a lot this one, and I really hope we can all get the opportunity to know what is the real nature, because the nature for me, it is not only like a national park when you can move around, but it is the way that you are connected with this environment. And this is the way I am connected as a nomadic pastoralist person. So I know from the desert to the savanna into the tropical forest. So all these places we move from it. And then I know like the different specific weather, when it is hot or when it is cold or when it is the rainy season. So I think those are all my land, and those are all the places where I care about it and where I feel like I'm connecting to the nature. I feel like this is me. I feel I am alive because I know all those beautiful species. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hindu. So, Councilmember Davila, you're not the last, but let us know how you feel about those places that you love.
There's so many, you know, there's like the streams, when you can go and see the fish and children like climbing on the rocks and touching the water, and you hear the birds, you see the hawks, you see, it just gives you such a tranquil serenity. And luckily here in Berkeley, we're 5 minutes from the ocean or the bay, and we have the Tilden Parks really close by. So you can escape and smell the bay leaves and see the, you know, all the deer with antlers or different types. You know, the deer always make me feel happy. You know, even on a freeway, when you like, you look and you see like a fox, like it off to the side, you know, or if you're at the ocean, and to feel like I have tendonitis in my ankles. So when you feel the coldness of the water and you just feel how that makes you feel, it makes me feel so much better, the healing of the ocean. And just the sound of the water against the rocks, that's just makes me feel so happy. And you see sometimes owls, you know, or whatever the animal is, like some kind of huge rodents, they're just there living. And that just brings me back to the time when, you know, the indigenous, we're on Turtle Island, so the indigenous ancestors, you can, sometimes you feel their presence. And even in Berkeley, we have a shell mound, which is a concrete parking lot, but they have ceremonies there. And if I go there, I just feel the strength of the ancestors and the prayers that have been said in that space. So I've given you quite a few different scenarios, but they all make me feel better within this urban environment because it's still thriving in these ways. And you can just look and see and hear the birds and see the flowers and all the different like types of healing properties in these spaces, even though you think it might just be a weed, you know, but it's not. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me here today. This is a beautiful, I feel so honored to be here with all these panelists. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. all of you for sharing. And it's a topic that we could go on and on about, because it really touches at the core of who we are and what we really care about. But for purposes of time, we'll move on to the next question that I would like to ask, which is, where are we now? What does the current situation look like where you are with respect to the pandemic? What real existing solutions have you seen that give you hope that we can heal broken relationships and fix injustices and unsustainable practices? And I will go ahead and have Maya start.
Oh, so where are we? So just to clarify, the question's kind of where are we, and then what am I seeing around me too? Yeah.
Yes.
I feel like we're in this pretty, for me, I think a lot of people are saying, it feels like going back to normal in some places. Countries are reopening and cities are reopening. And for me, we're in the most terrifying part of the pandemic, the part where no one wants to acknowledge that we're still in a pandemic. And I think we're seeing some of the most terrifying parts of our world really come to bear in a really real way. I'm thinking, it feels for me like watching a slow moving domino effect of the implications of capitalism and colonialism and climate crisis and the prison industrial and the criminalization of poverty, and it's just all hitting one after the other. For me, I've been in in between Toronto and Halifax, where we've started to see, like a rental crisis increase, and all of these determinants of health compound each other. Whether we're in the midst of a massive homelessness crisis, the likes of which we have never, ever seen, that is just hitting in almost every single major city on this continent. We're also seeing the incredibly disproportionate impacts of who is actually being affected by this virus and who is being condemned and left to die. And so I think for a long time at the LEAP, when we've been talking about climate action, whether that's being anti-poverty work, or whether that means what people would historically think of what climate action is, whether that's nature conservation, we've been saying that the conversation we're having about is capitalism a system that works for us? Do the police actually make us safe? Are borders real, or did we just make them up to allow supremacy in all its forms to keep moving? We've actually been having this conversation about who is worthy of surviving the climate crisis for a very long time. We've just been calling it border enforcement, or funding the police, or allowing billionaires to exist. And now I think what we're having is, when we're having this conversation about who is worthy of surviving, we are having a climate discussion, because we're talking about really who is worthy of surviving climate catastrophe, period. Who do we believe has value and is awarded inherent value? And so for me, that is like a very core part of where we are with the pandemic right now. To make it more of a place-based concept in Canada and in Toronto, where I was, right before the pandemic hit, we were having unprecedented direct actions across the country as the Canadian military invaded Wet'suwet'en territory in so-called British Columbia, while they were trying to force through an oil pipeline through tens of different Indigenous communities that had said very absolutely and quite clearly that there was no consent to this pipeline going through these territories. And what we saw in a really incredible tactical shift in how we're talking about health impacts and climate action, almost all the major arteries of our state system began to be shut down as people left their homes and put their bodies on railway tracks to stop the state from being able to operate. Basically, trains stopped moving in this country for almost a month. And that's truly incredible. We had never seen something like that happen. So we went from that happening in almost every major city in the country, where people couldn't, no rail traffic was moving, food was not being moved, products were not being moved. And we thought, if we can disrupt the arteries of the capitalist state in Canada, we can actually force a conversation about what happens when climate catastrophe hits. And so we've seen a lot of like very interesting ways that this has changed. We went in Canada from the middle of that to self-isolation, to making sourdough and everything people had been doing on Instagram. And now we're in the midst of a racial justice revolution in North America. There's a massive revolution happening, and we might see prison abolition, or at least the abolition of the police in our lifetime, something I never thought I would see in my lifetime, which is incredibly exciting. But I think what we're in this, and I'm saying all of this because I think we're at the portion of the pandemic where we decide how far we're going to take our fight for liberation. And we actually get to lay the groundwork for we get to decide how high the watermark is going to be, and for who is going to be worthy of survival, what type of systems need to be torn down. I've been thinking a lot about what Arundhati Roy has been saying about the pandemic as a portal where we can choose to drag the carcasses of violence and hatred and colonialism and gender inequality and poverty and capitalism through this portal, or we can travel light, leave it behind, and believe that we are worth much more than this and we are capable of a much better world and fight like hell for it. And I feel like that's the portion of the pandemic that we're in. We're having the conversation about what we want to leave behind and what we feel, and like whipping up the political will to understand that we can actually leave that all behind, and that's not going to cause us any harm. It's only going to make the world better. So I feel like we're in this really critical conversation, fight for the high watermark place of the global pandemic, and what is categorized as meeting the needs of everybody, as opposed to just a few. I could ramble on and on about this, so I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. Anybody else want to chip in, want to say something in regards to that question about any real existing solutions that you have seen that give you hope that we can heal our broken relationship and fix injustices and unsustainable practices?
Here in Berkeley, go ahead.
You can go ahead, Councilmember.
Okay, thank you.
I'll speak up to you.
So here in Berkeley, we have 398 cases of COVID right now and 4 deaths, you know. And in Alameda County, it's like 11,000 total something, and I think 178 deaths. And people are walking around without their masks and, you know, not always physically distancing. And here we call bubbles. So like if your household is a bubble, people can enter into your bubble. But you should stay within that bubble for a certain period of time. But, you know, what gives me hope is that because of this the pandemic has brought out the systemic, institutional, structural, environmental racism. And now all the people that have been affected by that are affected the most by COVID. The Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks, Latinx. So, but what gives me hope is the mutual aid that's happening, you know, because all the people that, you know, community-based organizations or free clinics and suitcase clinics are all coming together to provide mutual aid for people that can't get out of their homes to go shopping. They're providing water and food and programs for our unhoused community. One thing that we did in Berkeley, thankfully, which I tried to do a couple of years ago, but we increased the shower program, expanded that so the homeless can be able to like wash up at least once a day. And we expanded that. But we have to do way more. I've been asking since I've been in office, like we need to know who's out there, how we can help them, you know, and that more coordinated services 24/7 for our unhoused, because the unhoused community is really becoming much larger in Berkeley. And now, unfortunately, the city is going to be enforcing on our sidewalk ordinance, which is a 3x3. You can't have more than a 3x3 footprint. And we have RV community, we have encampments, and recently they've been threatening to enforce on those. So we need to like really do better on not criminalizing the homeless, and providing more so that we can help them and help ourselves. Because I feel if we're all united, we can do a much better job. You know, we have to get rid of all the isms that are keeping us apart so that we can help each other more effectively and efficiently. So that's what gives me hope, the mutual aid, but we have to do way better in a much larger capacity to get that done. Thank you.
Maybe we can jump in this one. Sure. So just to share with you what is happening in the other side of the world, like coming from Africa and especially in Sahel. You know, right now, like many media are saying, oh, maybe Africa is a little bit safe from this pandemic. But I can tell you that it is not the reality, because it is the different views and the different analysis where we are when we talk about the pandemic. So for us, there is no hospital in many other rural areas. And people have like 80% of them living in these rural areas. So there is no access to these hospitals. There is even no access to the clean water and then to wash the hand or to apply the social justice. So for me, the world where we are is still the world of the injustice and the world of the inequity between the nations and between the communities. As coming from indigenous communities, so our peoples are the most vulnerable to this climate change and to this pandemic. So for me, having the climate change impact, and in addition, we have the COVID impact, so our peoples are becoming more and more vulnerable. And then secondly, the inequity and the way that we are treating the climate justice and the way we are treating the COVID are the same. It's hitting the most vulnerable, and it's leaving many people behind as women, children, people with disability. I give you the examples. So with in the community, with the diseases, there are women who are taking care of the man, of the children, giving them food, giving them also the medicine. With the pandemic, it is the same. And with climate change, when it's hitting more the women. Why? Because they are the ones who are taking the water, taking the food in the brush, and then making all the system to them communities to get the survival. So the impact are really real in this phase. But what we can do, or what we are seeing, what can give me hope personally, I think the solidarity that's coming across the borders, even we close the borders, it doesn't matter. Solidarity coming across the continents, across the borders. People are seeing each other as human now. They're trying to help the elders. They're trying to give the place to the most vulnerable to become the first one who can get in the solutions. So that's give me hope. And the second, the world become a village, because there is no like the impact only the most of, African land or Asian land. So the pandemic is across all the continents. And then all the head of state come together and say they have to change through the economy. So they are talking about the billions that they wanted to inject into the economy. I found that good, but good in the way if they inject this economy in the communities that need it, in the most vulnerable. They inject it in the climate solutions, but not giving this money to the big industry again. If they inject it to the big industry who are grabbing our land, who are destroying the resources, and who can make this inequity, I think it is not the right solution. I think this cannot give me hope, but it can give me hope if they define the green revolutions as the revolution for the most vulnerable, as the revolution for the peoples. They can invest, for example, in a renewable energy, giving access to everyone the energy. They can invest in nature-based solutions. But what is the nature-based solutions? That's the questions. As indigenous peoples, we do use our traditional knowledge, who are the nature-based solutions. But if they invest on the peoples, believing on us, giving us the way we can take the decisions on where they can invest this money in a sustainable way, so that can give me more hope to build better and to transform better our life. I think we have many things in common. So we do have the air we can breathe in common, the water we can drink in common, the food we need in common. So if we save those common for us, you can come from developed country or from developing countries or from indigenous communities like us, so we can transform our world for a better and we can save it for a better.
When I was listening to my council member in Hindu speak, and I think the first thing that came into my mind is this pandemic has made us realize that the world we're living in, the systems that we had normalized are not working. And that's what has been exposed by everyone, by those systems, that the things that we have assumed that is the solution have not working. And a lot of the capitalism, the various systems of oppression that had been there, racism had been raised before, but it's only no one was paying attention to it. And I think this pandemic has just been a spark plug which just exposed everything. Because what happens with health, what happens when you destroy the environment, when you impact any action that promotes inequity, the most affected, the effects are usually, they come is through health, through ill health, because we're in this ecosystem where everything is balanced. So right now, when as you talked about, where initially in the early stages of the pandemic, people thought Africa would not be as affected, and people were saying, no, it's cushioned. And I remember some people were talking about it affecting probably the elite who travel a lot. But right now, I think one of the things, the conversations people are having now is, okay, why can't health systems in Africa respond to this pandemic in most African countries? What is wrong? So we are talking about questions about, like, for example, structural adjustments over time that have been affecting health systems that were not being questioned. And this is bringing this people were talking about sustenance, the pattern system and everything. And these are things that are resulting in, for example, shortages, and why it's expensive, why some areas need PPE. Because at this stage, the whole world is in need of the same equipment, the same resources and all. And it's the richer nations which are getting priority. You are hearing of richer nations rushing to compete to who gets the punches for the vaccine, who gets for that. So the developmental models that we have had all this time have always been in favor of the developed world, and they have caused the developing world. And this is what's coming, because right now, most of the manufacturing of the resources, resources were being extracted from a lot of African countries, and they were going there to develop the richer nations. So the African countries, a lot of them were dependent on that. So consider the carbon emissions in terms of that whole, because things were not being locally produced. Already that was not a sustainable model, but it was continued because it worked in favor of the systems in place that favored the small elite. So this pandemic has exposed that. And I think one of the things that is making me hopeful is the conversations that it has triggered. And I'm hoping that it doesn't end there. And I'm just hoping that these conversations will go on to actions. Because I think what has shown us is, one, for example, who knew that at any point all planes literally would stop flying? We knew that in some places they would see clear skies for a moment. So in other words, things we thought were impossible have been shown to, because we've come up with various ways. Like, imagine if it wasn't for COVID-19, probably we would all have gathered in some place, would have all flown to that place and to have these discussions. But now we're having discussions from different parts of the world. And it is also connected. Unfortunately, a lot of people are still kept out of this conversation. And I think there's a lot of still people, particularly, I was reading, when I was reading one of the emails, which was talking about a panel of experts in environment, the communities are still being kept out of these conversations because they do not have the privilege, they do not have the resources to be here where we are right now. So it's, I think, one of the most important things that we really have to hold on is the reflection on, okay, well, we should not continue on this path, but we should look into how we can go on into a more sustainable and progressive path. And it is possible, because a lot of things that we thought were impossible have been proven to be possible, and a lot of communities are coming together to work together and help each other. And those are some of the things that we can learn from the situation right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for sharing about that. So much to talk about, so little time. So Tatiana, I will come to you with this question about how did we get here? And if you can share about your understanding about ways that COVID and climate are connected, and the similar root causes of this.
I am thinking I would like to share some words about emergent diseases. This pandemic is making us thinking about emergent diseases, how we are exposed to new pandemics. But I am listening, for example, talking about Amazon, how Amazon, we have a new diseases from Amazon, since we have more biodiversity there. So we have more viruses there because the biodiversity is higher. And I think trying to answer your question, the point is not biodiversity. It's not the existence of virus. The coronavirus is not the problem. The problem is how we are connected with the forest, the rainforest and any forest. The cause is not the existence of a specific virus. Is deforestation is the problem. Fragmentation of the forest is the problem. The problem is we are burning Amazon, not the animals and the species that we have there. The problem is, and it's not one thing, another thing that is very important for me is not the cultural aspects, it's not the eating habits, it's poverty the problem. I am a researcher, and I strongly believe that the most important when we are talking about emergent diseases is not the biodiversity. It is fragmentation, forest firing, and how we are connected is them, other several environmental impacts. And it is not cultural eating habits. It's poverty, it's malnutrition, it's unsafe sanitation, it's poor access to healthcare, to sewage. This is the problem related to emergent diseases and to COVID pandemic and climate change. The origin, I think, is more related to environmental impacts and poverty and inequality than the presence of the virus. Yes. Nightingale?
Anybody else want to come in and add to what Tatiana has said? It's yes, it's just very touching information, but very real.
Capitalism is one of the root causes. You know, the corporate structure, you know, it has gotten us here. You know, fossil fuels should have been kept in the ground, and you know, environmental racism. I mean, they put all these like refineries in communities where people of color, so they get, you know, the physical environmental impacts on their health. And, you know, they might be forced to work in these environments, which is impacting their health as well. I mean, it's just the whole gamut. And racism by putting these you know, refineries in these places, or whatever the corporation is, in these environments where people of color, indigenous, are living and have to deal with. And so the health impacts from that, which has compromised their health now during COVID, it's just, that's one of the reasons why we're here, right? So recently I put in an item, declare racism as a public health crisis, a threat and safety issue, you know, and the policing as well. I mean, policing has gotten us to where we are with, you know, the militarization, the war, all the chemicals, the tear gas, you know, all these things that are impacting all of us and our health. If we took that military budget and put it somewhere else, where would we be today? That would be amazing. You know, that's why it's important that we defund our police departments and reallocate those funds to community organizations that are really gonna help people, you know, help us get past this pandemic. And COVID has put us all on the same playing field. So the world really must come together to regenerate our economies in a sustainable way that's not going to create the harm and the trauma that this capitalism has done for all of us for generations. You know, that's what gives me hope also, is that the world can unite for real. We have an opportunity and we have to grasp that, because here we are. That's our, you know, and it's unfortunate that, you know, number 45, that's what I call him. I won't say his name, but we all know who he is. Not my president, but the one of the United States, has, you know, not led. He has not been a president. You know, he's unprecedented, actually. So, you know, if that weren't the case, maybe we'd be in better off right now. You know, we wouldn't see the numbers climbing and everything, but we have to really come together and forget the isms, and as a world to try to come back from COVID. Like I said, we see blue skies. We have free transportation right now. You can zip through the tolls because you don't have to stop. Who would have imagined all that would have happened, you know? But here we are. We have to keep that maintained somehow, some way. And if we get rid of our military budgets, defund our police, and reallocate these funds, we have an opportunity. Thank you.
So, thank you. We are getting close to the end, and so I did want to just ask really quickly, first, to think about where we're going and what concrete steps and collaborative actions we can take today, both individually and collectively, to bring about transformative change. And on here, if you want to talk a little bit about what you would want to see your government needing to stop this pandemic, needing to do to stop this pandemic, to address the climate change and prevent the pandemic of the future, you're welcome to do that. And also, if you have a statement about what you would want to see the activists in the United States demanding of the US government to reduce and eliminate risks related to climate change and pandemics, you're welcome. But just really quickly, what concrete steps and collaborative actions can we take today, collectively?
I think for me, one of the things that has happened a lot is if you look at COVID-19 and climate change in terms of the impact, you notice Zimbabwe, where I come from, right now is about more than 50% of the population are on the verge of starvation because we had a drought. And also there was also a cyclone last year, which displaced a lot of people, affecting Mozambique and the eastern part of Zimbabwe. And all these are, so the most affected countries by climate change and by COVID-19 are the most vulnerable countries, which have been victims to extraction of resources and all. So I think probably one of the most important things that needs to be raised in any movement, in both the movements, in the climate justice movements actually right now, is the importance of acknowledging the issues being raised by everyone right now, in terms of the systems, how they contributed to where we are today. And as far as taking the solution, we need to go back to the drawing board and listen a bit more. Let's stop this top-down approach of having decisions being done, of having, like, for example, a lot of people being left out in research, and a lot of African countries being left out in research about global health, about climate change. Then you have things, then you detect on how they're supposed to have interventions without acknowledging the realities of the communities. So I think we really need to rethink even meritocracy in terms of who qualifies to be involved in this conversation. And I think one of the most important things that we have to take away is we need now to go back to our communities and have the communities be the center of a lot of these conversations in terms of what can we learn from them. I was amazed when Hindo was sharing about her own experiences and so many opportunities that can come from there. Like if people were to go into a community and learn. And a lot of people have talked about the role of the indigenous knowledge systems in conservation. That's important even in health, because what has happened is a lot of these people have been kept out of these conversations. So that means for activists in the United States of America, and for activists globally, particularly when you're coming to work on the continent or to assist in any of the movements, I think take a step back and listen. Do not come with your preconceived solutions, but try to listen and find ways in which we can build collaboration and solidarity, and find ways that you can learn. So information should be bi-directional, not one way. And I think even for our governments, it's high time right now, even in the responses, it's high time that our government had engage the community, engage everyone. If we can have that participatory action, and I think particularly the most vulnerable people, the most affected people in the community, it can make a huge difference. And I think that's one of the, I can go on, but that's one of the key things that I would really want to highlight.
So I can take one more response, and then we will go on to the Q&As. Tatiana, do you want to say something?
Yeah, so just a few words. I think there is a strategy to destroy forests. It's not a random thing. There is a strategy. There is a strategy to kill indigenous people, to kill Black people. There is a strategy. We know that. We are here for long time, and you know that. I think the point is how we can to be stronger, and I believe that we are stronger when we are together, and how we can make this work, because it's hard. It's not right. We know that and the other hand, the other place is very strong. It's very powerful. So I think this is a first step, being together, I think. And where we are the places that they can destroy. They want to destroy. So I think just that this is a point. We know what they are doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. So I will go ahead and ask the questions that we have from our audience, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can. And if we don't get to them, we will communicate about them, and feel free to email us with any questions that you have. So Hindu, if you can answer this question, what do you, as a grassroots activist, want the international community to do?
Yeah, I think international community can do a lot. Firstly, when we take the climate change, we all know that according to the science, but according also to the indigenous peoples, we do have like 10 years or less than 10 years to reduce all the emission in order to respect the Paris Agreement's objective, who is the 1.5. But let me tell you, in my community, we already are in 1.5, like in my country in general, already in 1.5 plus degree. So if we respect the Paris objective, it's going to be like 3 for us. But if we do not respect it, it's going to be more for the peoples who are already living on more than 130 Fahrenheit. So it's going to be a huge disaster in all the places. So the international community must respect absolutely the obligation of the Paris Agreement. Second, there is the objective on biodiversity. We all know that the world lost more than 61% of the species. And I can tell you, I'm witness of this species lost. Why? Because when I was young, the kind of birds, the kind of insect, the kind of plant that I knew personally disappear and disappear forever. It is not an history. It is not a report. It is not a TV documentary. It is a reality that we are living. So we need to restore this ecosystem. And how we can restore it is by respecting the climate change and by respecting the environment in general. So we need to see where the food is coming from, how we can eat it, how we can conserve. So it is the consumptions and production system that we need to change. It is the relation with the nature and with the ecosystem in general that we have to change. It is respecting the right of the indigenous peoples that protecting the 80% of the world biodiversity. It is recognition the knowledge of the indigenous peoples who are very essential to restore the ecosystem and to fight climate change. Third, we need to fight the COVID, but COVID, it is only maybe the beginning of the series of other sickness that we are going to face, who can be accelerated if we do not protect the environment. Because we all know that even the vaccine or the medicine that's coming, 70% of it or maybe more coming from the natural molecule coming from the plant. And then we need to protect this environment in order to save our own life. Otherwise, we cannot save our health. So our health as human and the planet is all interlinked. That's why we need to protect the environment. We need to respect the right of the peoples, and we need to take all together the right solution. And international communities have two platforms to do it. The SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, they have to respect it. They have to reach it by 2030. The Paris Agreement, they have to respect the objective. They have to reach it by 2030. And the rest of the nature will play the role himself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just, because of time, I'll just direct these questions to individuals, and if anybody wants to come in and chip in, please feel free. But Tatiana, I would like to ask, how can the idea of climate justice accelerate individual and community healing from the impact of COVID?
I am thinking about this time of pandemic, and since I am talking about Amazon, this period is in Amazon. We started the forest fire period, the dry season. So now it's the driest season in Brazilian Amazon, not just Brazilian. But, last year we had more, we know that we had more forest fires than before. And we had 30% more hospitalization due to respiratory diseases than the years before. So we know the impact of air pollution, forest fires related to air pollution. And we know that we have a strong increase in hospitalization, and medical resources demand attributable to respiratory infectious diseases, mainly in children and older people. So it is impossible we not think together about climate change, COVID. This is we are concerned now because we have a pandemic demanding in a region with lack of healthcare, and we will see more air pollution, more forest fires, and it's impossible think as a separate. Everything is we needed to see all inequality and environmental threats together. So when we are working for healthcare units, I believe that we are thinking to climate change and protecting areas. This is how I think the only way to think about that. I answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. So I know you all have inputs, but I'll go to the next question, and this one will go to you, Maya. Are there any specific policies that you think are necessary that we can rally around and fight for right now?
That's a harder question because it's so different place to place, but I also want to really second what Tinashe and Hindu have been saying, which is communities have solutions already. We're talking about like big level policies oftentimes, but communities have been loudly declaring what they need for many, many, many years. And I think the messy work of this coalition in figuring out what communities need will be coalitions, building coalitions, getting used to building coalitions. One of the policies in the United States that I've seen a lot of people getting excited about, and also we have been championing at the LEAP, is all of this Green New Deal language. But there's an important critique of the Green New Deal that like people need to come back and think about, which is that when we're talking about hitting our targets, our 1.5 degree targets, which are already, like as Hindu was saying, much higher in many other parts of the world, that type of transition requires mining the likes we've never seen. Who is harmed most when we think about mining? It's mostly communities at the heart of extraction. It's mostly indigenous communities. It's still wealthy elites that are going to become more and more wealthy. So when we're thinking about policies that are actually going to keep us safe, hit our global emissions targets, and actually center communities that are going to be affected by it, then we have to go back to community consultation processes. We have to let communities define the solutions that are going to work for them. And we have to think really innovatively about how we want to resist in this global system. For people that are asking what type of policies they should support, I would encourage you to get out into the streets and join an organization in your community that has been fighting for communities' needs for as long as they have been around, and think about ways that we can be helpful. For me, that means I think one of the most important policies in North America right now that everyone should be behind is we need to completely defund, disarm, and abolish the police. We do not need police systems. They do not make us safe. In fact, they make everybody unsafe and they spread disease. We need to really fundamentally attack capitalism. People have been talking about, COVID as an equalizer. COVID, I think, has actually really shown to us how incredibly unequal we are. And there is a very specific group of people that have only gotten wealthier. We now have one of the first multi-billionaires, the first multi-billionaire in the entire world. I think there should be a very big conversation about do we want to live in a world where there are billionaires? Does that actually help us get closer towards addressing climate action? Does that actually help uplift our communities? Or does it systematically drain resources from communities that have been attacked by capitalism, by colonialism, by racism since time immemorial? So I think the policies, if let's expand what we think about when we are talking about policies. Let's fundamentally attack all of the systemic controls that allow for capitalism to flourish in our society and in our world. Let's think about the systems that keep capitalism in control, and those are police, that's military personnel. We don't need a world with the military. So I think those are the first two things. Let's attack capitalism at its core. There should not be billionaires. We need to take the commons into the public ownership. People should have a stake in where they live and how they are able to grow their food and how they're able to raise their children and the type of access to healthcare that they should be able to get. All of these things need to come back into communities and be owned by the public. And wealthy elites and multimillionaires should no longer have that much money, and everybody should have access to resources. So go into your communities, look at the people who are creating community solutions that work for them, and help in all the ways that you can to dismantle the colonial systems around us, the capitalist systems around us, by going straight to the source and hit a really high watermark of the world we want to build right now. So I'm going to do that instead of directing people to policies.
Awesome. So, Council Member Davila, this is really, so what have you found is the most effective way to engage with privileged or unaffected people, in quotes, who are comfortable in the current system, be it health or climate? How do you show them how wrong the system is? And that is another way.
That's something that I have to do on the daily, because often I'm in the corner by myself. So I stay authentic to the beliefs and the reality of situations, and bring it forward. I have to talk about the racism. I have to talk about the unfairness and the disparities, so that, because I find that I'm not a politrickster. I feel I'm not a politician. I'm an elected official. I'm someone that stepped up to be part of a change I wanted to see made. And I stay true to that. You know, I don't deviate. I'm principled and accountable. So I feel that's what we have to really try to get people to really do. I mean, we have to get better elected officials to that aren't going to be influenced by all the corporate and evilness of this world. You know, I'm a different, in a different league all by myself sometimes, but it's important, you know, because the voice of the people has to be heard by somebody. And I'm that voice.
Thank you. So, Tinashe, this question will come to you. How can we empower local community in fighting climate change in a sustainable way?
Okay, thank you. And I think I'll reflect back on what you mentioned in terms of, even Maya talked about, in terms of the communities being, knowing the solutions, or having a lot of the solutions involved. So I think that the communities can empower us and we can learn a lot from them. I'll give an example where, for example, in my culture where I grew up, the totem system, whereby my totem is elephant. So it simply means that if you were in a hunter-gathering setting, for example, I'm not allowed to eat or kill an elephant. Then my other cousins, theirs was zebra and theirs. So you'd find that there are a lot of different animals So essentially it meant that at any point there was no pressure on one animal species, because you have a system where we would protect, like right now, an elephant is a very important animal to my family. So we ensure, so the protection of elephant is valid, because even our perception of it has evolved to suit the current world where we are in. So these are some of the, so if you listen to a lot of stories, like I was, in terms of, for example, there was an organization that was doing work in
Tinashe,
but then they went back to the communities, then they sat down with the elders and they asked, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
So they asked the elders of the community in terms of, well, how did they used to conserve these places? And the elders told them that no, these were sacred places growing up, when they were growing up when they were young. Then they told them of that, how the displacement that people had during colonial times affected some of the practice, because they were moved from their homes, they were moved to other areas, to the barren areas, once the fertile land was taken. But when they took in the elders and they started listening to the elders, and they put the elders in those communities on the forefront, the conservation, so you can look up conservation efforts in the what is called the Matobo district in Zimbabwe, and a few other papers that are coming in that are being written about the importance of indigenous knowledge. So the idea is, we, like a lot of us, we have the privilege of an education and like being involved in research. So what we can do is we can use the skills that we have to go into the community and try to learn from the community. Then what we can, and we can listen more to the community and put them at the center. So that means we are not going with our top-down approach. And understand, and I think one of the most important things is try to understand the context. Because sometimes we dismiss people as ignorant because we don't understand their context. We don't understand their lived reality. Try to understand the context, try to understand where they're coming from before dismissing them. And I think that's very important and crucial, even for before you come in and you try to tell them. Then from then, you can find ways how you can collaborate with your skills that you have, with your knowledge that they have, with the knowledge that they have, with the skills that you have, where you can find common ground in building more sustainable and having more sustainable solutions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So a question for Hindu. What international support does Africa need in terms of capacity, knowledge, access to latest technology, and financing instruments to develop and implement multi-hazard and multi-sectoral disaster risk reduction strategies that include climate pandemic risks?
So before to come to your question, I just wanted to echo what my brother Tanashi say here. Just to take like the local peoples, the communities as experts, because they know more than environment better than anyone else. And then when you support them, this is building them capacity. So coming to your questions, what the international communities can do for Africa, I think Africa do have them own knowledge, them own way of implementing them projects. So what they need, it is the recognition of the responsibility of all the developed world vis-a-vis to the climate change impact, vis-a-vis to the colonization, vis-a-vis to the development that we are very late on it. So if they recognize that, they have to assume the responsibility of paying back to those countries in order to choose another way of development. Because otherwise, if Africa starts also using fossil fuel and start using coal mine, it's going to be a disaster for the world. But we don't want to have that. We want our African leaders to invest in a sustainable way for our development, for our health, for our education. But they can do that only if they get this respect. So we talked during the COVID about the debt release. So how they can cancel all the debt of the African countries in order to start building the economy in another way, and then having a new way of vision for them on economy. And another thing that the international, is so noisy in my place, I'm so sorry. So another way that the international communities can do, it is also to respect the weather. Just a second. So how the international can respect paying back like people like mine. Like my community never create the climate change and they never receive any single money to help them when they give the development aids. So how the international community can change the rules and procedures of accessing the direct funding to the communities who are needing it. And then the third thing is the technology. We know all that the world is built on the technology, but there are a lot of countries and communities that left behind. And this is the SDG number 10, having the equity between nations and equity between countries and between continents. So the technology transfer needs to adapt to the needs of the African countries. It needs to be not only like transferring the technology, but without transferring the technique after the technology. So it has to be all together. We have a lot of youth in Africa who are doing the startup, who are creating ventilators even for the COVID now. So who have also the idea of building green, of the green revolution of all the industry. So this is the way of supporting the African continent to go in green way. And finally is to believe on the youth, because Africa have more youth than the old peoples. And the youth peoples are the one who can make the change. So giving them access to all the international level where they can come and talk for themselves, and that can help to make the exchange. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we will stop the question and answer here, but to be continued, and thank you everyone. So before we transition to small groups, I will share a very important discussion about pandemic prevention from a 2017 World Bank book about disease control priorities. Although most pandemic preparedness activities focus on reducing morbidity and mortality after a pandemic has spread widely, certain activities may prevent and contain pandemic sparks before they become a wider threat. At the core of pandemic prevention is the concept of One Health, an approach that considers human health, animal health, and the environment to be fundamentally interconnected. Activities in this second preventive category cost a mere fraction of what it costs to contain a pandemic once it starts. This brings to mind the compelling wisdom contained in Benjamin Franklin's quote that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. More specifically, according to a recent policy brief in the journal Science, responding to a pandemic such as the current spread of COVID-19 is 500 times more expensive than taking preventive measures. This precautionary approach is at the core of our People's Pandemic Prevention Plan that our Right to Health Action Team developed and is actively promoting for adoption as United States policy. We are joined here together to collaboratively make the world a more wise, just, and sustainable home for both our generation and all the generations who are yet to come. So thank you so much, panelists. And we will touch base again.